Alright, and finally page 3, find the period, amplitude, and phase shift, and the vertical shift of an equation. So remember the amplitude is here, so amplitude would be 12. Period is 2 pi for cosine, sine, and secant, cosecant. It's 2 pi divided by b. So for the period, I'm going to take 2 pi and divide it by 2, so I get pi is the period. Phase shift is c, the opposite of c, so pi over 8 divided by 2. And so remember, dividing by 2 is like multiplying by half, so that's going to be pi over 16. And no vertical shift, that comes out here. Alright, number 2 is the sine again. So the amplitude is the number that's in front of here. It's just a -1 that's in front of there, so the amplitude is 1. Period is again 2 pi divided by 2, so the period is still going to be pi, just like the number 1. The phase shift is equal to the opposite of this, so it's going to be pi over 2. Again, it's the opposite of c over b, so just pi over 2. And then the vertical shift is 30. Alright, and then the last one is a cotangent. So there is no amplitude, so amplitude you just say there is none. The only two that have amplitude are sine and cosine. The other 4 don't, so there's none. The period for cotangent and tangent is pi, so you would take the normal period of pi and divide it by b. So period is pi over 2, so remember tangent and cotangent are a little different. And then the phase shift is going to be the opposite of c over b, so -5 over 2. And there is no vertical shift. Okay, so that's finding those things without worrying about the graphing piece. Then the curve fitting, where you have to write the equation as a sine curve. So you need to look at your graph and say, what's the amplitude? Amplitude, if you look, you have to make sure that this is the axis, if there's no vertical shift. So from the axis, I went down 3, and from the axis, I went up 3. So the amplitude is 3. I know that piece from the graph. The period is either from a 0 to a 0, or from a minimum to a minimum. I would probably do from this 0 to this 0, and that is pi units. So the period is pi. And if I'm dealing with sine, if I start here and go down, I can just leave it with no phase shift, as long as I put a negative in front of my amplitude so that it goes down first. So the only thing I really have to figure out then is what is b. So if the period is pi, that has to equal 2 pi over b. And so if I cross multiply, I get b times pi equals 2 pi. Divide by pi, and I get b is 2. So my equation, y equals, remember I started here and went down first, so I'm going to go -3 sine, and my b value is 2, and there is no phase shift. So -3 sine 2x. Make sure you write it as an equation, y equals. Alright, number 2, as a sine. So again, I either can start here and do the curve, I can start here and do a negative sign, I could start over here and do a sine. I'll probably start over here. Looks like it got shifted. So the phase shift is -2 pi over 3. That's my phase shift. The period, it takes how long to get, so this looks like these go by thirds. Let me just double check. Yeah, it looks like every tick mark is a third of a pi. So I went 2/3 here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 thirds. It looks like when I counted, I just started here. I could tell these were by thirds. So I went 1/3, 2/3, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 thirds. So that's 4 pi. And the amplitude, this looks like I went up 2 units here, and I went down 2 units there. So it looks like the amplitude is 2. Alright, so I need to figure out first the b value. If the period is 4 pi, that equals 2 pi over b. So 4 pi b equals 2 pi. divide by 4 pi, I get b is 1/2. So that's b. And then the phase shift, phase shift, which is negative 2 pi over 3. That's the phase shift, has to equal opposite of c over b. So all I need to do to solve for c is I need to multiply by 1/2. That's going to get rid of the 1/2 here, so I multiply by 1/2 over here. The 2's cancel. I'm left with negative pi over 3 equals negative c, so c is going to equal pi over 3. So what's my equation look like? Remember, my amplitude was 2, and I'm starting over here, so I don't need to put a negative in front of it. So y equals 2 sine of b was 1/2, so 1/2 x, and then my c was pi over 3. Okay? Alright. The next two just say you have to use a cosine curve, which is nice for this one because there's no phase shift. I'll just put a negative in front of it. Looks like the amplitude, I went down 1 and up 1, so the amplitude is 1. Period is how far did it go from here to here? And we have to decide what the period is. That's pi, so it looks like that would be a third. This would be 1/3 pi. This would be 2/3 pi, and that would be 3/3 pi. So it looks like the period to go from one minimum to another is 2/3 pi. And then I would have no phase shift. And remember, no vertical shift because I went up 1 and down 1 from that axis. So the only thing I have to figure out is b. So the period is equal to 2 pi over b. And then that's easy to see. If 2 pi over 3 equals 2 pi over b, b is going to have to equal 3. So I've got b. There's no phase shift, so c is 0. And my amplitude is 1. But again, I'm going to put a negative in front of it because I'm starting down there. So y equals negative 1 cosine of 3x. And then the last one, we're doing cosine. So I would probably start here. You could start down here as well, or over here. But I would probably start here. So say my phase shift is a negative pi. Amplitude, it looks like I go down 2 and up 2, so amplitude is 2. And then the period to go from one maximum to another, that's all one period, so that takes a total of 6 pi to complete that whole cycle. So I first have to find b. Period 6 pi is equal to 2 pi over b. So 6 pi b equals 2 pi. When I multiply by b to get rid of that, divide by 6 pi. 5 will drop out. I get 2 over 6, which is 1/3. And then to find c, the phase shift we said was negative pi. So negative pi equals negative c over b. So to get rid of this divided by 1/3, I'm going to multiply by 1/3 because that goes away. So here I have to multiply by 1/3. So I get negative pi over 3 equals negative c. So c equals pi over 3. So my equation, y equals, remember I started here, so I don't have to worry about a negative in front of my amplitude. My amplitude was 2, cosine. B was 1/3, so 1/3 x, and my c value was pi over 3, plus pi over 3. And there's my equation. Okay, so that wraps up page 3.